Custer's last love, the woman who refused to let him die. This is the secret history they tried to bury, the truth about what really happened at Little Bighorn, and the woman who spent her life hiding it. General Custer's last words weren't shouted on a battlefield. They were written in a letter his wife would later burn. Why? What did Libbie Custer know about her husband's final moments that she took to her grave? And why did she rewrite history to protect his legacy? The answers will change everything you thought you knew about America's most controversial hero and the woman who created his legend. Like and subscribe before YouTube removes this. Unveiling the complex legacy of General George Armstrong Custer. In introduction, a figure of contradictions. George Armstrong Custer remains one of the most polarizing figures in American history, a man celebrated as a Civil War hero and vilified as a symbol of colonial violence. His life, marked by audacity, ambition, and ultimate tragedy, invites a deeper exploration beyond the myth of Custer's last stand. What truths lie beneath the legend? Tamar Dreyeson, Washita, the Civil War prodigy and the boy general. Rapid rise. At just 23, Custer became the youngest Union brigadier general, earning fame for his daring cavalry charges at Gettysburg and Appomattox. His flamboyant style, gold-laced uniforms, and cinnamon-scented hair made him a media darling. Contradictions. Despite graduating last at West Point, the GOAT, his battlefield instincts were unmatched, yet his recklessness foreshadowed later disasters. Hidden truth. Custer's wartime success masked a penchant for rule-breaking. He was court-martialed twice, including for abandoning his post to visit his wife, Libbie. The Black Hills betrayal. Gold and broken treaties. In 1874, Custer led an expedition into the Black Hills, violating the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty. His confirmation of gold sparked a rush, igniting tensions with the Lakota. Political pawn. Some historians argue Custer was a willing tool of expansionist policies, though his personal motives, whether glory or duty, remain debated. Little Bighorn, the unraveling of a myth. The fateful decision. On June 25, 1876, Custer ignored scouts' warnings of thousands of Lakota and Cheyenne warriors. Dividing his 7th Cavalry into 4 battalions, he launched a premature attack, believing the village would flee. Instead, he faced a coordinated counterattack. The Last Stand, re-examined. Archaeological evidence reveals a chaotic rout, not a heroic stand. Bullet casings show troopers fired in panic, while native accounts describe a swift, tactical victory. Scapegoating Reno and Benteen. Critics argue Major Marcus Reno's retreat and Captain Frederick Benteen's failure to reinforce sealed Custer's fate. Yet Custer's own orders were vague, and the terrain obscured visibility. The complicated man behind the legend. Personal life. Custer's marriage to Libbie was passionate, yet he allegedly fathered a child with a Cheyenne woman, Monahsetah, a claim reflecting his fraught relationship with Native communities. Race and Reconstruction. Stationed in Kentucky post-war, Custer scorned efforts to protect Black citizens from the Klan, revealing conservative racial views. Heidi, legacy, hero, or villain? Myth-making. Libbie Custer spent decades crafting her husband's image as a martyr, while Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West shows sensationalized his death. Indigenous perspectives. For Lakota and Cheyenne, Little Bighorn was a defense of sovereignty. As Chief Plenty Coups noted, alliances among tribes were pragmatic, not monolithic. Modern reckoning. Historians like T.J. Stiles argue Custer embodied America's contradictions: ambition, racism, and the frontier's brutal expansion. Conclusion, a legacy that demands nuance. Custer's story is not just one man's rise and fall, but a lens into America's conflicted soul. His triumphs and failures reveal the costs of manifest destiny and the resilience of Native nations. To understand Custer is to confront the myths that still shape our history. Final thought. Was Custer a tragic hero or an architect of his own demise? The answer, like the man, is shrouded in complexity. Mirwankin, so sit back, relax, and join us on this captivating exploration. As you follow along, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Your support helps grow this community and keeps these stories alive. In the world-long history of West Point, Custer's disciplinary record stood out, not for excellence but for sheer defiance. Graduating dead last in his class, his brilliance was never doubted, yet his rebellious streak was undeniable. Whenever faced with consequences, he would dig deep, refocus, and fight his way back. His life was a paradox. Equal parts chaos and calculated discipline. When the Civil War erupted, Custer, fresh from the academy, proved himself a natural leader on the battlefield. Knowing his greatest asset was his own courage, he seized every chance to advance, often throwing himself into the heart of combat to stand out. He howled from the front, charging alongside his men, never asking them to go where he wouldn't. With the horses gunned down beneath him and clad in flamboyant uniforms, he made himself an unmissable target for enemy sharpshooters. Yet his bold appearance mirrored his fearless tactics. He didn't just command, he fought. Despite wading through the bloodiest battles of the war, he emerged as miraculously unscathed. Custer credited his survival to sheer luck, a belief that seemed to hold true. His fearless actions earned him commendations for bravery from his very first engagement onward. From his very first clash at Bull Run, Custer's star began its meteoric rise. His daring cavalry maneuvers captured the nation's imagination, with papers like the New York Tribune hailing him as the hero straight from the pages of an adventure novel. Double asterisk. The soldiers of his Michigan Brigade, many old enough to be his father, idolized him, faithfully charging into the war's bloodiest battles behind their young commander. They even adopted his signature scarlet neckties as a badge of honor, a symbol of their shared audacity. War demands theater as much as tactics, and Custer mastered both. In the crucible of combat, where visibility means everything, he played his role flawlessly. Sword raised, voice booming. Every inch the fearless leader, his men didn't just follow orders. They followed a performance of invincibility. One he sustained battle after battle. Brash, undoubtedly. Effective, unquestionably. In the chaos of the Civil War, Custer's reckless courage wasn't just his trademark. It was exactly what his troops needed to believe victory was possible. Custer's legend takes flight. That iconic image of him, sword gleaming, golden locks flowing in the wind as he led the charge, landed him on the cover of Harper's Weekly, cementing his place in the public imagination. After his pivotal role at Gettysburg, where his daring cavalry maneuvers helped turn the tide, Custer skyrocketed to fame as the war's youngest star. The Boy General, a nickname that stuck as firmly as his reputation for fearlessness. He refused to leave the front lines where he was fighting relentlessly until the war's final moments. In a twist of fate, it was Custer who accepted the flag of truce at Appomattox on April 9, 1865, when Lee surrendered. The man who had entered the war as a reckless young officer now stood at its symbolic close. A living legend at just 25 years old. Yet this triumph was only the beginning. The same boldness that made him a Civil War hero would soon lead him westward, toward glory, infamy, and an encounter that would etch his name into history forever. A general's reward and a carefully crafted image. As the Civil War drew to a close, Custer received a singular honor from his mentor, Lieutenant General Philip Sheridan, the very table on which the Appomattox surrender terms were signed. Along with it came a personal note to Libbie, Sheridan's tribute to her husband's role in securing Union victory. Permit me to say, madam, that there is scarcely an individual in our service who has contributed more to bring about this desirable result than your gallant husband. A master of perception. What set Custer apart, even among war heroes, was his keen understanding of imagery and myth-making. In an era when photography was still novel, he ensured his face and flowing locks were captured again and again, crafting a persona that transcended the battlefield. The Cavalier persona, his recherche flamboyant uniforms, Washita gold-trimmed jackets, and your signature long hair, ginawam, scented with cinnamon oil, weren't just vanity, they were calculated theater. He styled himself as a modern-day knight-errant, blending romantic heroism with military prowess. Girlish beauty, fierce reputation. Custer took pride in his youthful, almost delicate features, yet used them to amplify his legend. The contrast between his pretty complexion and his reckless courage made him all the more fascinating to the public. A press darling. Newspapers and magazines couldn't resist him. Every photograph, every engraving reinforced the myth. Custer wasn't just a soldier, he was a symbol. The birth of a legend. In an age before celebrity culture, Custer invented his own. He knew that history remembers not just deeds, but the stories we tell about them. And he ensured his would be unforgettable. Little did he know that same legend would soon face its greatest test on the plains of Montana. The duality of Custer, a performance of contrasts. Custer mastered the art of defying expectations. He was a living paradox, blending feminine elegance with masculine bravado, aristocratic refinement with frontier grit. Where others might see contradiction, he saw opportunity. A gentleman warrior. His polished manners and fastidious grooming, down to the cinnamon-scented hair, clashed deliciously with his reputation as a hell-for-leather cavalryman. Theatrical by design. In an era when your public figures were expected to perform, Custer didn't just play the part, he wrote the script. Critics dismissed him as a circus act, but the public adored the spectacle. A mirror of his time. The late 1800s demanded larger-than-life personalities. Like Buffalo Bill, Grant, or even Barnum, Custer understood that visibility equaled power, and he weaponized charm, flair, and calculated eccentricity to stay unforgettable. Why it worked. While some sneered at his flamboyance, most found it electrifying. In a nation rebuilding from war and hungry for heroes, Custer offered both drama and dash. A knight in shining velvet, charging not just toward enemies, but one straight into legend. His genius lay in knowing that history doesn't just record deeds, it remembers characters. And Custer, he was always the star of the show. Yet behind the performance lurked the man, ambitious, restless, and forever chasing the next act. The stage was set for triumph and tragedy. The curtain falls on war, but not on Custer's restlessness. Custer, ever the consummate showman, had spent years making grand entrances, whether leading a cavalry charge or striding into a ballroom. Yet in the unhushed aftermath of Appomattox, he faced a role he couldn't command, a soldier without a war. A stark demotion. Though he'd ridden high as a major general of volunteers during the Civil War, peace relegated him to a mere captaincy in the shrunken regular army. The U.S. military, once a sprawling force of 1.5 million, now numbered just 30,000. Glory days gave way to Mayfair budget cuts and bureaucratic tedium. For a man who thrived on action and adrenaline, garrison life was a slow suffocation. A marriage as dramatic as his battles. Adrift, Custer clung to his anchor, an audience of one, Libbie. Their love was operatic in its intensity. He called her Audie. She preserved his legend for decades after his death. His whispered plea, "Oh, Audie, we must die together," was less morbid vow than a warrior's refusal to fade quietly. The stage goes dark. The years ahead would test Custer's hunger for relevance. Would he settle into obscurity or find a rough new battlefield? The answer lay westward, where history and the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho waited. For now, the hero stood in limbo, too famous for peace, too restless to stand still. A love forged in destiny, the Custer's unbreakable bond. Libbie's words, "Better the humblest life together than the loftiest divided," became the beating heart of Custer's world. In her, he found not just a wife, but his North Star, the one constant in a life of upheaval. His own vows to her were no less fervent. "Allow me to repeat to my darling that while living, she is my all, and if destiny wills me to die, my last prayer will be for her, my last breath will speak her name, and heaven will not be heaven till we are joined together." How it began, a Monroe fairy tale. Their romance unfolded in Monroe, Michigan, a small town where fate wove their lives together long before they knew it. 1849. A 14-year-old Custer arrives in Monroe to live with his half-sister and attend Stebbins Academy. A rough-edged boy with a restless spark. 1862. He returns, transformed, now a year further 23-year-old cavalry captain on General McClellan's staff, his wartime heroics making him the town's most dazzling bachelor. Libbie Bacon. 3 years younger, she was the golden girl of Monroe, polished, witty, and the daughter of Judge Daniel Bacon, who initially despised Custer as a brash upstart. Against all odds, Judge Bacon forbade the match, dismissing Custer as a penniless soldier with more vanity than prospects. But Libbie, smitten by his vitality and tender letters, defied convention. Their courtship was a battle of its own, fought with stolen glances, secret notes, and Custer's relentless charm, a union stronger than war. When they finally married in 1864, it sealed a partnership that would outlast battles, scandals, and history itself. Libbie didn't just share his life, she shaped his legacy, guarding his myth long after Little Bighorn. In the end, their love story was the one campaign Custer never lost. A love that defied convention, the Custer romance. At first, Libbie Bacon dismissed the brash young cavalry officer as more show than substance. But Custer's relentless devotion wore down her defenses. What began as indifference soon became an all-consuming passion. As she realized she held on the one title Custer prized above general, the center of his universe. The making of a legendary couple. Opposites attract. Libbie, polished, educated, and refined, was everything the rough-edged Custer was not, yet she found herself drawn to his unshakable ardor. His letters burned with declarations. "If loving with one's whole soul is insanity, I am ripe for an insane asylum." Defying her father. Judge Bacon saw Custer as a reckless upstart, but Libbie cared little for his disapproval. In her diary, she confessed, "I forget everything sometimes when I think of him. You're a cavalier and his lady." Together they became the era's most glamorous military couple. Libbie, the cultured beauty, Custer, the daring hero. She thrived on the adventure, writing, "Oh, how dear he is. I love him so much. His words linger in my ears, his kisses on my lips." A wartime wedding. On February 9th, 1864, they married in Monroe, though Judge Bacon's grudging approval came only after Custer's meteoric rise made him impossible to ignore. Their honeymoon was cut short when Custer was summoned back to war, But Libbie, defying Victorian norms, followed him to camp. She became his constant companion, enduring the hardships of military life with unwavering loyalty. A love as fuel for legend. Their bond was more than romance. It was a partnership of ambition and myth-making. Libbie didn't just adore Custer. Cheyenne understood his need for greatness, standing by him through triumphs and recklessness alike. In the end, their love story would outlive him, as she spent decades ensuring the world remembered her Audie exactly as he wished, fearless, glorious, and utterly devoted to her. Final thought. For Custer, Libbie was both sanctuary and spur, the reason to charge forward and the home waiting when the battle dust settled. A union forged in fire, the Custer's unconventional partnership. Defying all expectations of a proper Victorian Army wife, Libbie Custer didn't just wait at home. She marched into the fray, living in frontier outposts, canvas tents, and rough-hewn cabins to remain at her husband's side. Theirs was no ordinary marriage. It was a shared campaign, with Libbie as both devoted companion and strategic ally in crafting Custer's legend. Love letters from the battlefield. When forced apart by war, their correspondence became a lifeline. Pages upon pages, right, of tender vows and shared ambitions. My rosebud, my darling sunbeam. Custer's floral endearments contrasting sharply with the bloodied battlefields where he wrote them. Audie, Libbie's childhood nickname for him, a private joke that underscored their intimacy. Beau, her title for the man whose vanity she lovingly indulged, even as she matched his strong will. A meeting of minds and ambitions. Custer confessed in letters, "When I think of how successful I have been of late, I think she will hear of it and will be proud of her boy." Libbie, in turn, refused to be merely decorative. "I would not lose my individuality, but would be a life within a life." She became his confidant, editor, and fiercest advocate, tempering his impulsiveness while championing his rise. The paradox of their bond. While Custer chased glory with reckless bravado, Libbie provided the ballast, steady, shrewd, and equally determined to see him immortalized. Their letters reveal a startling modern dynamic. She was no meek Victorian spouse, but a co-author of his destiny. Curry, legacy beyond Little Bighorn. Long after his death, Libbie's memoirs and lectures would cement Custer's place in history, not just as a fallen general, but as the man she loved. Brilliant, flawed, and forever hers. In the end, their greatest collaboration wasn't their marriage. It was the myth they built together, one letter, one battle, one memory at a time. Remember, I cannot love as I do without my life blending with yours. Custer to Libbie, 1864. Libbie Custer, a Victorian wife with a modern twist. Libbie defied easy categorization. She was neither a submissive 19th century spouse nor a rebel against tradition. In her own words, "I was never an admirer of a submissive wife, but I wish to look to my husband as superior in judgment and experience, to be guided by him in all things." This delicate balance, respect without surrender, devotion without diminishment, defined their partnership. She became Custer's most tireless promoter, leveraging her social grace and sharp intellect to advance his career, all while maintaining her own formidable identity. Custer's reputation, hero, showman, and ladies' man. While history remembers Custer for Little Bighorn and his Civil War exploits, whispers of his charm off the battlefield persist. The cinnamon-scented cavalier. His perfumed hair, flamboyant uniforms, and theatrical flair made him a magnet for attention, both on campaign and in parlors. Rumors versus reality. Though Libbie remained his true north, Frontier gossip hinted at dalliances, including a controversial ties to Monahsetah, a Cheyenne woman. Historians debate these claims, but his charisma was undeniable. A press darling. Newspapers chronicled not just his battles, but his society appearances, where he danced with generals' wives and regaled crowds with war stories. The 7th Cavalry, a new chapter begins. In 1866, Custer's career found fresh purpose when he joined the newly formed 7th Cavalry, a posting that would lead to immortality and infamy. Libbie, as always, packed her trunks to follow. Thanks for joining us on this dive into history's complexities. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more untold stories from our history empire. Dose. Who should we profile next? Let us know in the comments. History isn't just about dates and battles. It's about the people who lived, loved, and shaped our world. Libbie Custer outlived her husband by 57 years, but she never stopped fighting his last battle. The question is, was she preserving history or rewriting it? Why did she destroy some of Custer's letters? What truths died with her? And if we dug deeper, would we find the man behind the myth, or just the legend she wanted us to see? The real Custer wasn't just a hero, wasn't just a villain. He was a man who loved too hard, fought too recklessly, and left behind a widow who refused to let the world forget him. On her terms, was Custer a hero, a fool, or something in between? Comment below.